I've learned so much over this first year of podcasting, and I wanted to share with you guys the 10 most life-changing lessons that I've learned this year. So I created a document, and it's on my website. What you're going to do, you're going to go there. It's going to be 10 life-changing lessons. Click on that button. It'll ask for your email address so I can email it to you. Sign up for it, because these life lessons radically changed the way I viewed my life and the way I started living. It helped me to get better in the areas that I've so desperately wanted to see progress and growth in. And because I know they helped me, I really believe that they will help you. And I wanted this to be a gift for you guys. So I really hope you enjoy this gift, and go to the website, thewholepersonpodcast.com to get it. It's free. And I hope you guys enjoy and learn as much as I did from it. Today on the Whole Person Podcast, I have George Kamel. He's the co-host of The Ramsey Show and the host of Fine Print and the Entree Leadership Podcast. He served on the Ramsey team since 2013 and loves to help people spend less, save more, avoid traps, and make better money decisions. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Evan. Good to be here.
Good. Well, today we're going to be getting a little bit different of a view of your life in terms of what you do and where you've come from, probably than what you're used to doing on the Ramsey Show. And my first question that I have for you, in terms of, say, personal growth, I don't know if you've ever felt stuck in your life, but I know I have multiple times. And I guess the question that I have for you is, when you've gotten stuck, what have you done to kind of get out of that and then to even have a growth mindset past it?
Great question. Many times in my life have I felt stuck. And as a person who fancies themselves as a creative, which I'm sure you do as well, anyone who wants to start something new, make a podcast, make a piece of art, share something with the world, you're going to get stuck. So what I found that helps the most, number one, is digging in and realizing that there's probably some lies that we need to unpack, and we need to replace those with truth. And so as a creative, there's so many lies that we believe. I'm not good enough. I'm not the one to do this. I'm scared. It's not the right time. I don't have the money. There's so many things that make you feel stuck. And so what I found is, number one, realizing that those things, while they might feel like reality, it's not your identity. It's not who you are. You know, I believe I was made in the image of God. And so that changes the way you look at the world and the way you look at your decisions. And on top of that, I always bring in other people. When I feel stuck, I get outside perspective. I find mentors. I find people who have been there, who have done that, people I respect, to go, hey, here's what I'm experiencing. How did you get out of this last time you faced this? And usually that kind of wisdom paired with, the Bible, it's amazing what can happen, and it unlocks some amazing creativity.
Talking about getting unstuck, I don't know about you, man. So I noticed that you play and sing guitar. Wait, play guitar and sing. I got those backwards. And, being in Tennessee, in the Nashville area, did you ever want to be a musician full-time as a career?
There was a time back in, 2010, 09, 2012, where I was pursuing music. I actually took a year off college, and I was in a band, and we started a band, and I was co-leading that band. And it was kind of a small business when you think of it that way. You're trying to get the website up, you're marketing yourself. And I ended up releasing a few albums with that band, did a few solo albums under my own name. And I always loved music, but I found that the business side of it was tiring and exhausting, and it took away from the time as an artist where I wanted to create and share this message with the world. And I realized after stepping into marketing and really marketing the music that really my passion was figuring out creative ways to share a message that I care about. And what's cool is that I get to do that today here at Ramsey Solutions with our money message. And so while music is a passion of mine, it's going to be a hobby, and I'm okay with that. And so realizing that what's a hobby versus what's going to be my career can be two different things, and that's okay. But, I moved to Music City, not for a music career, but for this job here at Ramsey as an intern. And I took a chance on it, moving from Mobile, Alabama, where I finished school. And I always thought, well, you're in Music City, there's going to be opportunities to play music. And so I took advantage of a lot of those, playing some different shows, doing some solo shows, and I still have got my instruments. They're collecting dust mostly, and my wife reminds me of that at least once a week.
That's funny. So what I like about your story here is that there's this moment where you're pursuing something, you realize it's not for you, but through it you found something else that you loved and then pursued that a little bit further. And that led into the career that you have now. But what about the person? Or I don't know if you've ever been there in your own life where you feel like you've had to let a dream die.
Yeah. I mean,
How did
I
you
remember,
get?
as you said that, I remember working at the Apple store when I was about 18 years old, and I thought, this is it. This is my career. I'm going to be here forever. I love this place. And I got fired about a year and 3 months into the job for a reason that was unfair. And there was kind of everyone was getting fired for random reasons. It was kind of this layoff situation. And I remember just feeling heartbroken because I thought this was it. And it's funny how many times in my life I've latched on to something and went, this is it. And I've held on so tightly. And when that thing leaves, I just feel like lost because I was placing my identity in that thing instead of in who I am and going, okay, well, that opportunity's over. What's next? And so over time, after you have your pity party, you usually have that moment where you get up and you go, dust the boots off and go, all right, what's next? And so that's what I've found I've done in hindsight. It's hard to do it in the moment, but in hindsight, I've realized that at every time there's been a failure, whether that's with career or marriage or whatever it is, I realize that it's not over. It's not too late. I can get back up. I can go do the next thing. And so what I've done is just really dig into the next thing and following my gut and following the spirit and going, where is this leading me to? And instead of wondering why this thing happened, I like to look to the future and go, what's possible now? And that's a very different mindset to have.
Yeah, there's a few things that you said that I kind of taken away. One was you learned not to put your identity in that and to find your identity in your relationship with God. And then also in this process of learning more about your skills and design and your purpose and where your identity and your design and your purpose intersect with your skills and ability. And so what was that process like? Because for those of us that are out here like, all right, I think my skills and ability is this, and I really enjoy doing it. How do we find that intersection of purpose and design?
Mm. Well, my friend Ken Coleman, fellow Ramsey personality, he talks about this all the time on his show, The Ken Coleman Show, where he talks about finding that sweet spot between your mission and your talent and your passion. So, what are the results, the impact you want to see? What are the things you love to do most? And what are the things you're really good at? And he has a great assessment called Get Clear that you can take online. And it helped me. I took it recently just to see how it matched up. And it was amazing how it spoke to the exact things that I'm good at, that I love to do, and the impact that I want to see in the world. And so when you can do this at home, you don't need to take the assessment. The assessment's amazing. But if you just make a list of here's the kind of impact I want to make, here's the things that I love to do that I would do for free forever, and then here's the things that people tell me I'm good at, that I know I'm self-aware that, man, I'm a really good communicator. I'm a really good writer. And when you do that, it tends to point you in a direction. And if you just follow that trail, it's not going to be a straight line. It never is. Anyone who thinks the path from here to there is a straight line is wrong. They haven't lived enough life. It's always the most winding, crazy path. And you think, I don't think I'm going the right way, but this is where it's taken me. If you follow that, you'll eventually get there. And so my journey was 9 years here at Ramsey so far. And I went from intern to social media guy to email marketing guy to host and MC and now to personality, getting to speak and teach. And I never thought this would be my reality. I thought I was going to be the guy behind the camera, not in front of it. I was going to go to film school in Boston, and I ended up not being able to go because I didn't have the money. It was $200,000 to get a film degree at my dream school that I got into. And then my dreams crumbled when I realized I couldn't afford it. But I'm so thankful that I said no to that because it led me to where I am today.
So your dream of going to film school crushed, but yet it created other opportunities. How did you rebound from that moment of like, okay, this was my dream and it's not going to happen?
Well, first, again, there's a little bit of the pity party, right? You go, Mom, Dad, this is your fault. Usually you try to go blaming other people, and you usually, you're the victim and life is just happening to you. But over time, as I've gotten older, the most mature, healthy growth mindset stance to take is, all right, I'm going to look in the mirror and go, what is my involvement in the problem that I've created? And that usually, that level of responsibility, it changes the way you make the next decision. And so for me with college, it was, okay, I can't go to that school. What is the school that I can afford? And it ended up being a state school. And I was an English major, and I didn't even really like to read. And so after a year of that, I went, well, this ain't it. And so I dipped out of school for a little bit, and I pursued music, and I was working at the Apple store. And that led me down a different path where I started marketing, and that led me down a different path. And so what I found is if you just follow, I don't want to say follow your heart because it sounds very trite, just follow your heart. But if you follow that path and that gut feeling, and you avoid making costly mistakes along the way, which, money is a huge part of that. It holds people back from so many opportunities out there because they're falling for these traps. That can lead you to somewhere amazing. And it may take way longer than you think, and it's going to look way different than you think, but it's always going to be worth it if you just follow that path.
So I'm sure working at Ramsey Solutions and even for Dave, like you have no expectations, no goals. You can just fly by the seam of your pants and just kind of make stuff up.
Always.
And there's no real accountability or anything. Like that's my perception of.
Oh man, I wish. We had a 6 a.m. call time today, Dave and I, for a hit on Fox and Friends. And there's a lot of glamorous parts of the job, but waking up early and getting the powder on and making sure you look good and you know what you're talking about at 6 a.m. That there's some parts where you go, man, this is tough, but it's so much fun, and the team really makes it worth it. I love the people I work with, and it makes all the difference when it comes to a job like this.
So for those of you who couldn't tell, I was being completely sarcastic. Um,
Well,
my,
Dave sets the bar. Dave's got a
he
very high
does.
standard, and he's a beast. The dude is in his 60s, and he goes harder than any of us.
So here's my question: what have you learned about goal setting and maybe designing the goals to make them achievable, but yet hard enough? Like how have you learned to, like, you know what, I'm going to set this forth and I'm going to go accomplish it? What have you taken away from your experience there?
Mm, great question. So when it comes to goal setting, I obviously listen to a lot of Dave's talks, and he does a lot of this inside of Entree Leadership, where it's kind of his business playbook, how he built this business from a card table in his living room to what it is today, hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of team members. I mean, it's incredible what he's built. And what I realize is that Dave always has a BHAG, which we call a big, hairy, audacious goal. And it's the thing that scares you. And so to me, if the goal doesn't scare you a little bit, you set too easy of a goal. Now, we don't want to set ourselves up for failure when we go, well, I didn't lose 30 pounds in a week. We've got to be realistic, but I also want it to be a challenge enough to where I wake up every day going, oh gosh, I hope I can do this. And when I've done that, I've noticed that is where the true growth happens. That is where you get stretched in a good way. And we say around here, pray like it all depends on God, work like it all depends on you. And I love that mentality of there's a lot that's in my control and there's a lot that's outside of my control. And there's a beautiful sweet spot where God blesses your efforts. And I think that is where the most amazing things have happened for me when I'm doing things for the right reasons, with the right motives. I've got my eye on the prize. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And I'm not going to step on other people to make it happen. You do it the right way. And I found that if you want a long-term career anywhere, that's what you have to do. You can't, step on someone else's back to get to the top. That's not what it's about. It's about leveraging your relationships, your skill sets, what God has wired you to do. And when you do that and you do that to the fullest over time, that's when things happen. And Dave calls that momentum theorem. Focus intensity over time multiplied by God equals unstoppable momentum. That's how he's built this place. And I believe that is true for any goal you set in life.
I remember, golly, years ago, where I would listen to someone speak and I'd think, oh my gosh, that's great for that person, but I'm so far from that right now.
Mm.
And there's this gap between where they are and where I'm at and how to just even get started. For someone,
So what
go ahead.
Yeah, what you're talking about there is kind of comparing, and sometimes it's in a healthy way, right? Where it's an aspirational, man, that's so cool. I want to do that one day. But a lot of the times it can be a toxic thing where you just feel like you're never enough and you'll never get, that's not fair that they have that thing, whether it's entitlement or whether they work to get that thing or not. There's still this thing inside of you that's kind of this poison eating away at you. And so I would always go back to, what is my motive here? Am I jealous? Am I envious? Or am I just pointing at that going, I can do that. I want to be that. And so we had this big goal to pay off our house in our early 30s. My wife and I, she works here at Ramsey Solutions. We met here a few years back. And it was this big, hairy, audacious goal for us to pay off a $165,000 mortgage in a really short amount of time. And there's a lot of people who were cheering us on going, you guys inspired me. I want to have a paid off home in my 30s. But there's a handful of people who also go, well, that's not fair, or it was easy for them. And there's two kind of mindsets there. One is the growth mindset where you're just looking aspirationally going, you know what, they're going to be kind of a mentor, a guide along the way to cheer us on. Or you can look at it and always compare yourself and always feel like you're never enough and life's not fair. And I want you to have a victor mentality instead of that victim mentality.
Right. And it's so much of our conversation, it seems like it's really going back towards identity and talking about being a victor versus a victim. And even when it comes to figuring out your purpose and plan and design and moving forth with it, it all revolves around self-awareness and knowing who you are and knowing who you were created to be. And so in this process of learning those things, and you're not quite developed, you're not quite there yet, what are some things along the way that someone can do to help them not only become more self-aware, but also make sure that they're taking right steps in the correct direction? One of the things that you said earlier is, you started with college, and then you went to music, and then you went to marketing. Meanwhile, you're trying not to make big, large financial mistakes. Sometimes we can make mistakes that really prevent our future. So how do we grow in a direction that we're not quite certain yet without making mistakes?
Well, there's a lot of failure that's going to come your way. That's normal.
Correct.
And there's a lot of failure that you can avoid that can be detrimental. So, for example, taking out $200,000 of student loan debt in order to go to film school would have been a detrimental mistake. Me getting fired from Apple or the band not working out, that's okay. I'm okay with those types of failures because I put my all in and I tried. But making a decision that is going to set you back, and a lot of people honestly are ignorant to what those mistakes could lead to. And an example of this is we did a documentary called Borrowed Future about the student loan crisis, and I interviewed a guy named Josiah, and he was talking about the fact that his student loans have prevented him from buying a home, from having a family, from being a good husband. And it just broke my heart to see how young people out there are being held back because of money traps, because of debt, and they can't do the things they want to do. They can't live where they want to live. They can't work at the places they want to work, all because of debt. So to me, those are the really big mistakes, the big failures you don't want to go down. But you putting your all in and going, that wasn't it. I'm totally okay with that kind of mistake.
One of the things that I've often struggled with in my own life and journey is negative self-talk. And it all goes back to identity. And one of the things that, was a hindrance for me for so long was also student loans. I think we paid off the student loans in 2020. Yeah, 2020. So when COVID happened and they did a deferment, I was like, heck no. Like, I'm putting everything I can while it's not being increased through interest.
Yes.
So that really helped. And through this process of paying off debt for ourselves in our life, what happened in us financially is it went from being a very dark place with no light at the end of the tunnel to paying everything off except medical bills in our house. And so for us, like we feel like we've been in a better spot than we've ever have. I remember now. Okay, hold on. And it's allowed me to be able to actually reach for goals and desires and dreams because I'm no longer being held back by bondage and debt. And an example of this is obviously you're on my podcast. I wanted to start a podcast, golly, like 8 years ago. Never could figure out how. And then I listened to a podcast about a guy who's like, hey, I'm not arrived. How about you just follow me on my journey? And I was like, I can take that approach. And then I realized it was going to be one of his last shows. He went on to bigger and better things in podcasting. And he's like, hey, if anyone wants to kind of like buy this, I'm open to sell it. I reached out to him and he was going to sell it to me for $50,000. Okay. I did not have the money, but basically he would be the bank and it was making money. So I would just run it and then pay it off with the money it's already making. Okay. And this was like in late 2018, early 2019. And in 2019 is when we like really got everything paid off. But something in me would not let me buy it, even though I really wanted to. And the reason why I felt like I had to is because I didn't have enough confidence in who I was to get guests like you on the show. And the way that that podcast made money is because it also had a retreat where you'd pay like $10,000 to be a part of. And that host would host the retreat and they'd have mentor meetings and stuff like that. And that's where the majority of the money came. And what was so unique is that the way that the contract read is that they could put a lien on my house if I'm not fulfilling my obligation. And I was just like, no, I'm not signing this contract.
Wow.
We're done. I'll just figure my own thing out. But I knew I was supposed to podcast, George. Like and I felt like my dream left. So I started from scratch on my own thing. And it's taken a long time to build. But you know what happened in 2020? COVID hit. And for 2 years, no one really traveled or met. I couldn't imagine having a $50,000 podcast now not bringing any money in. And that would have been detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it was a part of my dream and vision, I had to forego that aspect and then kind of pave my own way because it was just cheaper for me to learn from my own mistakes versus taking on debt. So I resonate with what you're saying in making decisions or even failures, but in a way that they're not detrimental to your future. If someone has made a decision that has been detrimental to their future, what advice would you give to get out of that situation?
Well, number one, I want them to realize that it's not over. It's not too late. If you're $250,000 in debt and you feel like your life is over, it's not. And I've met people time and time again who have paid off more than that and have sacrificed and have been in worse spots than they've been. And that encourages me. That's not to compare. It's just to go, you can do this. And as long as you have that growth mindset that says, it ain't over till it's over. I'm going to get out of this debt, even if it takes me 5 years, 10 years, no matter what the journey looks like. This is the journey I want to go down because it's going to change who you are. We talked about identity. And, James Clear in his book talks about identity-based goals. And I think those are the best kinds of goals to set because instead of saying, man, I'm terrible with money, I should really pay off this $20,000 in credit card debt, you go, I'm the kind of guy who pays cash for things because I love freedom. And I know the borrower is slave to the lender, as Proverbs says. And therefore, I don't want to touch debt because it's a principle I have. Even if I can pay off that credit card every month, I'm not going to use it because you play with snakes, you get bit. And so that's a very different way to look at life and decisions. And so if you're in that spot where you've made a mistake, I mean, Dave Ramsey made that mistake. And I'm glad he didn't give up after he went through bankruptcy over 30 years ago. And I'm glad he got up and said, you know what? I want to help others avoid this. I want to help others avoid the pain that I experience with money, I want to help them have that freedom. I want to help them have margin and options and meaning in their life. And I'm glad that he's been down that path for over 30 years now doing this stuff. And he's grabbed people like me along the way to help him. And man, there's so much purpose on the other side of people's pain. And I
Yeah.
think if they dig deep enough and they're willing to do whatever it takes, amazing things will happen and it becomes a part of their story. And yes, we wish it didn't happen. No one wishes pain upon anyone or bankruptcy upon anyone. But what you make of that and the way it can impact other people and the way they can connect with your story because of that, man, that is powerful.
So I want to end this podcast with 3 questions. And I haven't asked these in a long time. What lie or negative self-talk are you currently telling yourself?
Mm. You know, I have struggled with insomnia for a decade now, at least. And there's days where you wake up and you go, oh my gosh, I got to be on camera and have energy and smile and be a person. And it just feels like too much. And so there's days where you wake up and you go, this ain't it, Chief. You're not cut out for this. You don't have the stamina. You don't have the energy. You don't have the communication skills to do this job. And there are still days like that where you wake up and you feel that imposter syndrome. And then you remind yourself of the truth. This is where God has put me on purpose, with a purpose. And it's nothing I could have done to get here. That's how you know you're in your sweet spot, when it's beyond you. It's beyond your own power of just, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and getting the job. It's a God ordained thing where you go, I don't deserve this. And yet this is where I am meant to make an impact today. And when you look at it through that lens, the imposter syndrome kind of just floats away. And it doesn't matter what the guy said on YouTube in the comment section that was really mean to you, because I go, he doesn't get a say in what my purpose is.
Yeah.
And it might hurt your feelings temporarily, but at the end of the day, I want to do what God has called me to do. And this is what he's called me to do. And if there's a day I'm tired, he's going to give me the strength to do it because he's called me to it.
What brings you peace?
What brings me peace? Honestly, I think it's other people. I think the way that God has spoken to me most often is through others. And the way that people can use an encouraging word or randomly send that email or a note, or just the way they interact with you, it can change your entire day. And so what's given me peace is just having good people around me who care deeply about this mission, about me, about themselves. And you're around people like that, it's hard to have a bad day. Even when you're tired or whatever's going on in your personal life, you show up and you have your publicist like Sarah here, and she's encouraging, and you're getting texts saying, man, you're doing a great job. Don't underestimate the power of other people to bring peace into your life. John Deloney says relationships are the emergency fund for your life. And I wholeheartedly believe that. When you're going through something, isolation is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
And so having good people, good community around you is one of the best ways I've seen the hands and feet of Jesus at work.
Speaking of John, so my episode with him just came out last week, I think. And dude, like he said something in the podcast that's totally relevant to this, but since I'm talking to you, here it is. We were talking about anxiety, and that's something like I've struggled with on a level that I've never struggled with like over the last year. And then he's like, do you ever get anxious about thinking about being anxious? And I was like, all the time. It was just, but it was one of those aha moments, going back to what you're saying about being around other people. Like I never looked at it that way. And then today I was like, man, I'm anxious. Why am I anxious? Because I'm worried about being anxious. And realizing the trigger, like without relationships, dude, I love what you're saying because it's just so true.
Yeah, and you mix that with truth, with grounded truth like the Bible, where it's like, oh, be anxious for nothing. What does that mean? What does that mean for my life today? And what is the root of that? And that changes everything. When you've got rooted principles and values mixed with amazing people around you with a growth mindset, man, I mean, opportunity is just right there on the other side of that.
Yeah. So without saying God or your wife, What's the best decision you've ever made? Well, we're working at Ramsey Solution, okay?
Ooh, the best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
Best decision I've ever made. Oh boy, that's a big one. It doesn't involve my marriage or God.
I
I
know.
would say
Or Ramsey.
the best decision I've ever made is to be myself at all costs. I know that sounds weird, but I think the times in life where I've been the most frustrated were the times where I was trying to be something or be someone that I was not meant to be. And I found when I'm my truest self, regardless of the consequences of that, is when I can look back with pride and go, I'm okay that that opportunity didn't happen because I stuck to my principles and my values. Or, man, I'm so glad I was myself because that brought out the best parts of me of how I'm wired and my humor or whatever the thing is. And so it sounds a little, cliche to be like, just be yourself, like Aladdin, we talked about before we started recording, an epic line from Robin Williams. But it's so true that being yourself, and that doesn't mean like being your worst self and just do whatever you want, regardless of how it affects other people. I'm talking about digging into that self awareness of who you are wired to be and going all in on that and do that with kindness and do that with a lot of respect and do that with an amazing work ethic. And I'm telling you, you feel unstoppable. You feel invincible when you stop caring what other people think and you're super aware of who you are and who you're meant to be and what you're out to do. That changes everything.
You ever have conversations where you're hearing like the same message almost, like from one person to the next person? Like literally,
Oh, yeah. It feels
I
spooky.
so everything that you just said, I literally just met with a coach uh, earlier this morning about some stuff on just some directional stuff in my life. And I've talked to a few other close friends of mine, and literally I'm hearing the same message from every single one of you. And I'm like, all right,
Wow.
there's this.
How would you sum that message up from what you're hearing?
Yeah. So for me, I've started a ministry and trying to figure out how I'm going to bring the podcast in and work that in the to make a long story short, the digital voice. What is that going to look like? And I've really struggled with that. And there's a lot of speculation, like maybe it shouldn't come into the ministry, but it should be its own business. And I'm like, but I'm wanting to start a ministry. So I'm wrestling with like, all right, well, I still have the ministry. I'm still going to do that. But what's this other thing that you're also might be calling me to? And so for me, it's going back to how did God create me? What things am I good at? But not am I just good at, but that bring me a lot of energy in life. And then also, what pains have I had in my life that God has taken me through? And then how can I take that pain, turn it into purpose, combine it with my skills and the way God made me and what brings me energy and go forth in that? And I'm
Mm.
just like, oh, golly, I have to peel back a lot more layers to figure this out. And so for me, that like everything that you just said is the season of wrestling that I'm in right now. So
Yeah.
I
And
appreciate
that
it.
can be frustrating. It can feel like you're not any closer to where you're supposed to be. And then in hindsight, after a year or two or three and 1,000 pivots in different businesses, you go, oh, that's exactly what needed to happen. And it's not how I would have ever planned it, but that's how I know it was right because it wasn't all my doing as the puppeteer, And so I love that mindset that you have and that coaching that you had and really unpacking what are the lies I'm telling myself, what is the truth I know of who I am and who I'm created to be, and then who are the other people around me who can help get me there. Not in a toxic, networky way, but in a man, I want to leverage all of my amazing relationships because that is where all of the growth happens. Rising tide
Jim
lifts
Rohn,
all
you are the
ships.
average of your 5 closest friends or people in your life.
Exactly. And that might mean cutting out some of the ones that aren't serving you in that way and they're toxic and they're always complaining and they're always a victim because what happens is they suck you in. I like to say if you entertain a clown, you join the circus. And that's not the business I want to be in. And so I try to hang out with people, which naturally I'm around some amazing people here at Ramsey who are all super focused on some incredible goals and we're all cheering each other on as they pay off debt or buy the house or get a job, whatever it is. I just love supporting other people, and it changes your spirit when you stop focusing on yourself and you start serving others.
Well, before you go, tell people where they can find you and if there's anything that you want other people to know.
Sure. So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff at George Kamel. It's Kamel with a K, Kamel. You can find my podcast, The Fine Print, on Ramsey Network, wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as Entree Leadership. If you're into leadership or business, we talk to the best leadership minds out there every single week. And of course, The Ramsey Show, every day, 1 to 4 Central Time. I'm hosting that show at least twice a week, and it's a blast. And I do have another thing. I'll have to pull it up on my phone if you're willing to let me.
Or, yeah, absolutely. We'll just
it reminds me of everything we've talked about today, and I would be remiss if I didn't lay out the four principles there. Let me see if I can find it. It may take me a second. You'll have to edit this part out.
No worries.
So I gave a talk to our creative team, which we have a giant creative team of all the designers and the writers and the copy editors, and they asked me to kind of just give an encouraging talk to the team. And, knowing it was for creatives, I wanted to center it around that, but it's so tied to exactly what we're talking about today. And there was a few lies in there. Let me see if I have it. Some of the lies the creative tells themselves because of the cynic inside is it needs to be perfect, it needs to be mine, and it needs to be now. And those are some of the biggest lies that we need to kind of unpack as people with purpose, as people who have creative ideas, who want to pursue something. And so the antidote to that, realizing the truth, is you don't have to know how it ends to get started. And that points to momentum. Everyone always wants to, I want to know exactly how it's going to end before I ever start. And I've pre-planned multiple podcast ideas, and I here's all the things I'm going to do. And the more I planned it, the less likely I ever was to actually do it because I was scared. I was scared to put something out into the world. And so you just have to get started and be okay with it not blowing up and getting to the #1 podcast on the charts day one. And then the other one, you don't get to the good stuff without doing the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a huge principle I found is if it's not difficult, it's probably not right. There should be a level of tension and frustration and wrestling like you're talking about to know that it's the good stuff.
No
and then when
happens,
this, and then the other one is it has to be mine. We want it to be our idea, but the truth is your idea is never as good as our idea. And I talked about bringing other people in, and I found the most fruitful, amazing, memorable things I've ever created were never just me because of how amazing I am. It was in collaboration with other people who added their ideas to my idea, and it became our idea. And that was way better than anything I could have ever dreamt up on my own. There was probably a fourth one in there, but I think that sums it up. With, being vulnerable, willing to do whatever it takes, bringing other people in, and knowing that it's going to take a lot of time. It doesn't have to be now. And so knowing that it's going to be a 9-10 year journey helps your mindset go, okay, I'm not going to get that job I want 2 years from now because I got to put in the work. I may not have a #1 podcast next year, but 5 years from now, I'm going to see some incredible growth. I'm going to get guests I never thought I could get. And it may take longer than that, but it's okay. The fact that you were aiming at something meant that you're heading towards something that's worth it. And Zig Ziglar says, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. And so we have to aim at something. Otherwise, life just becomes meaningless, right?
Yeah. And thanks so much for coming on to the show today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been an awesome conversation. Really excited for everything you're doing with the podcast and your ministry and your business. A lot of great things on the other side of this.
Thank you so much. We'll have to have you on again, okay?
Appreciate it. Thank you, Evan.